the first question, one of the first questions that came in goes as follows: when you first characterize a new molecule, at what point in the workflow do you ask the binding mode question? And is that early enough?
Right. Good. Good question. And I'll give you my opinion. First of all, binding, oh, hang on a minute. Let me get my earphones in. First of all, binding is a different view. It's not a better view. It's not a worse view. It's a different view from what's happening at your target. Chemists insist on it. They like that. They live in a steric world because it's important for them to know where the compound goes, especially now with structure. Oh boy, now there's structure. The first thing they ask is, where is this thing binding? Because if I know that, I can now design molecules for that site. That's great. The binding mode and where it binds and so forth doesn't mean anything, however, unless it's expressed with through the behavior, the pharmacology. So there are binding data, especially with allosterics, which doesn't conform to function, which usually is because the species of protein each of these assays looks at is different. What matters? The function. That's what matters to the cell. So I, in general, prefer function. But at some point within a program, yes, at least the chemists will insist on binding. We used to do it. It was not a priority to the functional pharmacologists, but it can be extremely useful. So I don't mean to denigrate it. It's there. I don't see it as a first as a need. If you see a functional effect that you can link to the presence of your compound and target in a cell, you keep going. That's presumptive. Later, you can worry about where it's binding and so forth. It can be extremely useful to differentiate allosteric and orthosteric effects. However, it can be confusing. We screened out an HIV entry compound that was active in a screen, but it was allosteric, and we got all sorts of weird effects that confused us till we understood that. And most of those weird effects were binding, because binding will show itself in terms of changes of affinity, but not necessarily efficacy. So you're basically, Xing out half of your scale there. But having said that, it's worth doing. I don't see it as an immediate priority, but eventually it would be a good thing to know. I also know that in addition to chemists wanting it, I've had small companies trying to attract investors and so forth. And the investors, of course, live in a steric world. They want to know, does the compound bind there? Prove it to us. And it's sometimes hard to prove through esoteric allosteric effects on a cell. So finally, binding's one thing, but the world has changed. I tend to see it as target engagement, and there are a lot of new, very elegant assays to show the setsa and that kind of thing. So I'm assuming if you're saying binding to show me we have interaction, there's things beyond binding, like setsa, that will do the same thing, just physically show the compound interacting with your target. So the short form to that long-winded answer is, yeah, it's important. I don't see it as a top priority early on, but it probably should be done. I'll stop there.